Jain friends, I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Please encourage us. Now, recently, Imran Khan Niazi, Prime Minister of Pakistan, took a bunch of ministers, took his national security advisor, and went all the way to Beijing. He wanted to make a huge diplomatic statement. Now, that did not happen. But what were the takeaways from the entire trip? Did Imran Khan succeed or did Imran Khan fail? Today, I have with me Sushant Sareen. Needs no introduction, but he's a senior fellow in the Observer Research Foundation. And Sushant and I today are going to discuss what actually happened in Beijing. It's important because the cascading effect of that visit will mean something for Pakistan in the future. What is that something? Let's start the show. Sushant, a very warm welcome to the Chanakya Dialogues.
Thanks, Gaurav, for having me.
Right. So, Sushant, you keep a very close eye on Pakistani affairs and all things Pakistani. You watch them with a very keen eye. And Imran Khan, on his return from Pakistan, immediately handed over certificates of excellence to his ministers. And now there is infighting amongst the ministers. Ki ji, humne to bada acha kaam kara tha, hame mila nahi, isne bura, whatever. What did Imran Khan actually achieve in Beijing? It's very opaque. What did he achieve in Beijing?
In a word, very little. At least from what is available in the public domain, it doesn't seem that he got a whole lot. They were expecting hell of a lot. Gaurav, it's important to first look at the circumstances in which he went. He went that the big colonial state was holding a spectacle and it wanted its chela chapatas to come and pay obeisance. And that was one of the reasons why Imran Khan was summoned out there. He wanted to make it into a state visit, which the Chinese refused. They agreed to give him certain audiences after बहुत मशक्कत करने के बाद that he could meet Xi Jinping and the Chinese Prime Minister. But that was after a lot of effort. But other than that, he wanted to go with a huge jing bang and make it into a kind of a state visit, with the Chinese refused. They allowed 4 or 5 ministers to come. The reception given to him, the arrangements were no different from the other supplicants who had gone to Beijing. So out there, I don't think anybody can really crib about it. But other than that, he went as in attendance to the emperor, and he went as a vassal state going to the master. And basically, he went to pledge his allegiance to the colonial master. That was the sum and substance of his going out there. He had been summoned to express solidarity because the West was officially boycotting the Olympics at the official level, at least. And the supplicants had to go and pay obeisance.
So, Sushant, tell me, you see, he went all the way to Beijing, and then we also had this image of him having a video conference in Beijing with the Chinese people in Beijing, right? They were a few kilometers apart and he had flown thousands of kilometers. They could have well met, but they did not. The Chinese did not allow. Does Imran Khan, and this is a rhetorical question, I don't expect an answer, but some sort of response, because it's beyond me. Don't the Pakistanis understand a snub? Don't they understand that they are being insulted? Don't they understand that the prime minister is being humiliated?
Yeah, Gaurav, look, one is there is a set rule. No foreign visit ever ends up in a failure. Okay. It can be the biggest disaster in the world, but the spin is that the visit is always a success. Even the Pakistanis claimed Agra was a success. Okay. So no foreign visit is a failure, number one. Number two, the Pakistanis know that they are between a rock and a hard place. Now, what do you expect them to say? The people who are independent are saying that this movement, this visit had brought nothing. It really achieved very little. But the drum beaters of the government, of the regime, are obviously going to play it up and say that, look, it was a huge success, that we broke a new ground, historic visit. Every visit Imran Khan makes is a historic visit. You remember when he went to the US and he met Donald Trump? And they came back और वहां शादियाने बजाने शुरू कर दिए थे that this was a historic visit, big breakthrough. Imran Khan was acting as though he had won the World Cup all over again. You remember that?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
So if, and we all know how that turned out. The same thing has repeated itself in this latest visit to Beijing. And so they're doing the drum beating because that's what spin doctors are supposed to do. But look at in substantive terms, what have they got? And frankly, like and I'll repeat myself, from whatever is available in the public domain, there is very little, in terms of tangibles that they've got.
So, Sushant, what about this joint statement? Yesterday, I was speaking to a Pakistani ambassador, and he said, "नहीं नहीं आप जरा joint statement पढ़ें, बड़ा ज़बरदस्त joint statement है, sweeter than honey, iron brothers." जितने भी मुहावरे थे, all the idioms he used. But this joint statement, I couldn't find anything new in that joint statement. Were you able to sort of pick out anything new which was path breaking?
Nothing whatsoever. So, for example, let's take one particular example, Gaurav, on the formulation on Kashmir. Now, a lot of Pakistanis have said that the Chinese have backed us on Kashmir, etc., etc. But if you look at the text on Kashmir in the joint statement, the Chinese have said what they have been saying for years now, which is that this is a dispute which has come from history. This has to be resolved through dialogue and the relevant UN resolutions and bilateral agreements. Okay. And finally, that no side should take any unilateral action. Okay. Now, there is absolutely not a word which is new or path breaking or completely in Pakistan's favor, because uh, this is a Chinese formulation for years now. Uh, the unilateral part actually, in a sense, goes against the Pakistani plans to annex both POJK and POGB, both Gilgit-Baltistan and what they call, the Mirpur Muzaffarabad belt. They are planning to annex it in one form or another, and especially Gilgit-Baltistan, and that would construe to be a unilateral step. So clearly, even that unilateral step, which the Pakistanis see in the context of what India did on August 5, actually goes against Pakistani plans to annex Gilgit-Baltistan and the Chinese exhortations on to the Pakistanis to clarify the status of Gilgit-Baltistan because of all the investments and all the routes and other things as far as China-Pakistan economic corridor is concerned, which are going to be coming through Gilgit-Baltistan, which is part of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So even on that, it's a kind of a double-edged sword. So I don't know what they're celebrating about.
Now, let's talk about the game changer, which
Which game? Sorry,
Pakistanis.
what's the game?
No, what is
Game
the
kya
game? Yeah.
yaar?
Game
I
kya
want
hai?
to know what the game is. I've been hearing this damn word game changer, destiny changer, and all of that. But what is the game?
I think Sushant, they were better off without CPEC, the Pakistanis, and they were better off without the Chinese. I mean, compared to the current this thing, it's very interesting, and I would like to discuss this point with you. I've often seen Pakistanis blaming the IMF. IMF के आगे कशकोल लेकर नहीं जाना. IMF से कभी किसी मुल्क का भला नहीं हुआ. So this is what you'll see Pakistani TV anchors repeating day in and day out. But nobody mentions the Chinese loans and the Chinese investments, which are predatory in nature. Now, basically, बात क्या है सुशांत? बात तो यही है ना. At the end of the day, that IMF is, you know what you're getting into with the IMF. Everything is on a piece of paper. The Chinese thing nobody has seen. Oh, उन्होंने IMF को बता दिया because they had to get loans. Otherwise, it was a secret document. Not even the parliament completely knew what they were getting into. This was with the establishment, so to say. What do you have to say about this game changer, Sushant?
Look, number one, it's not a game changer, but to be fair to the Pakistani, it was the only game in town. See, CPEC came in around 2012, 2013, the whole thing. 2012, actually, Asif Zardari kind of started it. Nawaz Sharif took it forward. So 2013, if you want to take it, to be very, very strict about it, 2013 CPEC starts, right? It's 8 years. Uh, that was the time there's no investment taking place in Pakistan. Even the Pakistanis don't invest in Pakistan. Nobody has faith on either the economy or the survivability or sustainability of the state. It was only the Chinese who were coming in and pumping in money. Okay, so at one level, I can understand the Pakistani is looking at CPEC as something which will, because that was the only game in town. It was not going to change any game. What game would it have changed? Because nobody is clear about what the game is all about. Having said that, look, part of the problem in Pakistan is sheer ignorance on virtually everything. I think I partly blame it on their education system. They don't know the first thing about economics. Uh, when chartered accountants pretend to be economists, bankers pretend to be economists, and you manage to really mess up things. So, for example, they, India took an IMF loan way back in 1990-91. Okay,
Yes,
uh,
yes.
we were in real dire straits because of our own doing, our own economic mismanagement. We took those loans. We did the necessary structural adjustments. Not all of them, but we did some of them. Ideally, we should have done all of them. We would have been a different country today. All that 5 trillion, $6 trillion that we're talking about, we would have already achieved it. But nevertheless, we did reform, we did restructure, we did stabilize ourselves, we did make the necessary adjustments. And in the last 30 years, we haven't had to go back to the IMF. Pakistanis, what they do is, see, their problem is they think loans are disposable income. You don't use loans for productive purposes. Loan liya, khao piyo, ash karo, kal aur le lenge. Okay. Now, if that is your basic attitude in life, and they do it with everybody, if that is your basic approach in life, then no matter what the IMF says, you are not going to be able to deliver. The IMF has given you structural adjustment policies, which they say that you will need to bring your economy down right now, stabilize it, so that you can then take off. They will not do the hard work. So they will take the IMF. Ke, if you're a Punjabi, you'll understand what I'm saying. Vela lang jaye, you know. Let's tide over this moment. Kal ki kal dekhenge. So the problem is that every time you do this, you get into a bigger mess than what the IMF is trying to bail you out on. This time, however, the IMF has really clamped down and they said, listen, you have given us this this run around for very long. You've always misled us. Now we want you to do what we want you to do right at the outset before we give you any money. So the IMF has really toughened its stand. Partly it could be for political reasons, but partly it's for purely economic reasons. Now, under this, in this backdrop, the Pakistanis are saying, look, the Chinese are going to bail us out. But the Chinese are demanding huge rent from Pakistan for every loan which they give. And while the total quantum of Chinese loans is still not very big, it's only about 20 to 25%, it is rising at an exponential rate. So the Pakistanis are getting deeper and deeper into the hawk with the Chinese, and that is going to become a big problem insofar as their sovereignty, security, and even territorial integrity is concerned. And I think that is something which has now started bothering some of the people. Some people still think sensibly in Pakistan. I think that has started rankling them, and they are trying to find some way to wriggle out, some way to readjust with even the Chinese. But the Chinese are now not really cutting them any slack. If they cut them some slack in terms of rescheduling of loans, uh, they still continue to get deeper and deeper into the hawk with the Chinese. So that's where matters stand right now.
So Sushant, tell me, you spoke about Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which they call Azad Kashmir, and then you discussed about Gilgit Baltistan, and you said unilateral nahi hona chahiye. We understand that. I also read that. Uh, Now, my question to you is that initially when the Taliban were marching towards Kabul, uh, Pakistan had already sort of promised the Chinese that we will deliver Afghanistan on a platter. And CPAC thoda yahan se bhi aa jayega ji, yahan se bhi aa jayega and all that. Now, they haven't been able to do that. Coupled with that, coupled with that, uh, this entire blowback from Afghanistan with Taliban refusing to recognize the Duran line, uh, Taliban actually sheltering the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. We have been saying it, you have said it on this show, that they are two sides of the same coin. Now, Pakistanis are parroting that line, but they always knew that. They always knew that. They were lying to themselves as usual. Suddenly, the Baloch have woken up and precision attacks are happening. Now, where does this leave CPAC and where does this leave Pakistani credibility in the eyes of the Chinese? Because we know Dasu ke liye to unhone मुआवजा दिया ही दिया था Chinese को. So where does that leave CPEC? Where does it leave the game changer?
I think I think the Pakistani credibility is not very high in the Chinese mindset. And the reason for that is of course very clear, that the way the Pakistanis, the way they misled the world, they will they're not going to change their DNA just simply because it's the Chinese. So they've been giving a cock and bull story to the Chinese as well. So for example, on the Dasu Dam attack, what did they do? There were 3 or 4 stories that they were trying to peddle. And the Chinese knew what was happening out there, so they kind of clamped down on these people. But they have lost the credibility, even insofar as the Chinese are concerned, which is why you will see that they had promised, for example, on the electricity plants, way back in I think 2014 or thereabout, they had actually agreed with the Chinese to form some kind of a revolving account, because of this circular debt payments for electricity tariffs and all of that. The Chinese were insisting that their payment should come on time. These guys said, okay, fine, 20 or 22% of the payment we will put into a revolving around account so that you don't suffer. Now they have run up a circular debt with the Chinese amounting to about 250 billion Pakistani rupees. They have to pay up. Okay. What they had promised in 2014 or thereabouts, they are now saying that we are operationalizing it now. Now, if you are an investor, how much credibility would you, attach to anything which somebody who's promised you something 8 years back is now saying that I will deliver it to you because the crunch time has come? So one is that problem in terms of the Pakistani credibility in Chinese eyes. Secondly, I think the security question is going to be exceedingly important. Uh, when the CPEC started, the Chinese have insisted on very tight security for the Chinese projects and for the Chinese personnel working on CPEC. The Pakistanis promised them the world. Clearly, they have not been able to deliver. Now, the spike in attacks, both by the TTP as well as by the Baloch freedom fighters, I think that is really going to spook the Chinese, simply because some of those attacks will also be carried out against Chinese targets. The TTP already, along with some of the other Islamist groups based in Afghanistan, have expressed themselves against China and the genocidal policies against Chinese Muslims. So one is that problem. The Baloch, in any case, are anti-China simply because they say the Chinese are going to come and colonize us all over again, steal our resources, and make us into red Indians. So they are opposed to the Chinese. So I think there is this a factor that is also going to come into play insofar as the next round of investments is concerned, which at least are being spoken about. But as of now, we've not seen a single farthing coming into Pakistan under what they call the phase 2 of the China-Pakistan economic corridor.
Sushant, this entire foreign office, led by the peer of Multan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the entire foreign office believes, Imran Khan believes, that they can actually play a role in the world stage by getting China and US together. Now, okay.
Gaurav,
Yeah.
I thought you were doing a serious show, not talking about delusions of people, yeah. But
But I'd
very
like to,
mercy.
I like to know your comments, Sushant, because this is where does this come from? Okay. They recognized China in 1950, the Pakistanis, and since then they've been very close to the Chinese, taking money from the Chinese, etc., etc. All this has happened. But where does this confidence come from? Do you think there could be a Chinese angle? Because I don't think the Chinese are stupid. They have their own thing with the Americans. Does Imran Khan suddenly?
Gaurav, you saw the rebuff which the Pakistanis got when they tried to intercede between Iran and Saudi Arabia, right? Imran Khan pretended that he's the greatest leader in Islamic world, and because he could bowl reasonably well at one point of time, he was a third-rate batsman, but that's besides the point, and a third-rate person, but that's even besides the point. But he thought he could actually play a role between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and the rebuff they got from both sides. I think it's that same delusional mindset which makes him talk about now becoming a bridge between the US and China. You know, what happened in 69 is very different from what the world of today is. Uh, it's a completely different world. But if you have a person whose mind simply cannot process that 52 years back it was a different world, and 52 years later it is a different world. The dynamics of the world has changed. Everything has changed. What do you say to that guy? I don't think I can even talk seriously about this particular issue because it's laughable the way these guys behave. But these delusional mindset, what do you do about it? Yeah.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल लखनऊ में कहते हैं कि बेइज्जती तभी होती है जब महसूस होती है सो इफ ही इज नॉट फीलिंग इंसल्टेड ही इज नॉट बीन इंसल्टेड बाय दैट लॉजिक या ना अच्छा सुशांत टेल मी यू नो दे कीप ऑन सेइंग दैट द ऑपोजिशन पार्टीज you know the pro democracy movement parties and the other parties and all that they have more votes today in the national assembly and but whenever the time comes to actually pass a bill either they are absent or they don't how long do you think the establishment is going to hold on to Imran Khan Niazi? How long is he sort of important to the establishment to the army?
I don't think he's important to the army. I think as of now, there is a search for alternatives. Look, the voting in parliament, one can question the tactics of the opposition parties, whether they should have pushed things over the edge and ensured that the bills did not pass. But I think there was something happening on the back doors because, look, whether it was the State Bank of Pakistan bill or the mini budget, this was desperately needed because otherwise the IMF loan would not have come through. The IMF package would have collapsed. And with that, there would be no money coming from ADB, none from World Bank, and none from international financial institutions. So it's not just about the $1 billion which was going to come in this particular tranche, but it was also all the other billions of dollars which they hope to raise from the international market or from other financial institutions they were going to get. So one was that factor. And for that reason, I think they ensured that the opposition can make a song and dance about it and nevertheless get the bills through. Uh, now, now, there are two views which are floating around in Pakistan. If you ask me, I don't see how Imran Khan can survive for his full term. No prime minister has served out a full term ever in Pakistan's history, and there's no reason why he should be the one to be able to do it. But there is an other factor of history also which is important, that never before in history has a no confidence motion been carried out successfully in Pakistan. So I think there are these two contending factors of history which are coming into play, and I don't know which one is going to come to fruition. Now, one way of looking at it is that Imran has made such a mess that everybody now needs to see his back. That's the easy part. But if you see his back, what do you replace him with? And out there is no clarity. That is one part of it. The second part of it is that, yeah, listen, this guy has made whatever hash he had to make. Uh, but there are certain things which will happen nevertheless. So let's get that thing through. All the tough decisions, raising fuel prices, electricity tariffs, everything. This guy's name is already marked. Let him do all that dirty work. Uh, and then let's just go in for elections at the proper time. Perhaps call them a little early, 3 months, 6 months earlier. And then simply go in for a fresh election. Let the new guys come in with a new mandate and take it from there. Now, there are these two contending views in which there is other masala thrown in. Bajwa's extension, Imran wanting to probably bring in Faiz Hamid, which are going to create their own problems within the army establishment and all of that. But that's another factor. That is where matters stand right now. The problem, however, is that there is this climate of uncertainty. And in that climate of uncertainty, if you think that countries or companies or individuals are going to come and invest in Pakistan, are going to express confidence in Pakistan, I don't think that is going to happen. So I think you are likely to see a prolonged kind of an political instability going forward.
Last question to you, Sushant, is Mia Mohammed Bansha, Pakistani billionaire, owner of the Nishad Group. You know, I'll skip the part where his company Nishat Hyundai, tweeted about Kashmir. I'll skip that part. What I want to ask you is that he made this comment that track two is happening. it's happening with a fair degree of success, and you never know. You know, Narendra Modi may come to Pakistan within a month. ये so we understand कि शोषा है ये. We understand कि छोड़ा हुआ है. We understand there is no logic behind it. I don't think Narendra Modi would like to spend his equity, political equity, on a no game like Pakistan. There is no game happening in Pakistan at all. But what was this about, Sushant? What was this about?
Yeah, Gaurav, I would love to believe what you are saying, but having seen Mr. Modi operate, I will never second guess what he is going to do because he always pulls a surprise. Now, that is one part of it. I agree that Pakistan brings nothing to the table, but the obsession of Indian leaders to try and solve the Pakistan question is inexplicable, if you ask me. But it is there. It is an obsession every Indian leader has. I hope Mr. Modi has got over it, but I'm not sure of it. That is the second part. The third part is that maybe from the Pakistani side, some kind of a trial balloon was being floated to see what would be the response, what would be the reaction. Uh, and frankly, the reaction has been kind of middle of the road. There has not been any there have not been voices of taking great offense to what Mancha said. The thing is that Mancha is a very well connected guy. He is into the military establishment. He has huge business interests, which he would not like to jeopardize by talking about making up with India unless he had been put up to it. So was this some kind of a signal coming from the Pakistani side? The important question in my view is, even if it was a signal, should we go after signals as we have done for the last 70 years? Or should we go after substantive things that the Pakistanis do on ground to actually prove that they're turning over a new leaf? We've always been misled by this nonsense of some statement being issued, some signal being given, some message being delivered. And then when it comes down to the ground level thing, everything else remains the same. As you correctly said, that for all his highfalutin nonsense which Mancha was mouthing, his company went and did what it did, right? Along with other multinational companies. And I think we must talk about this also in some other program of yours on how India needs to behave, because this is new ground which the Pakistanis have broken. And we need to be able to game this and respond to this. But going forward, I don't see any real change inside the Pakistani polity, inside the Pakistani establishment, which would lead me to believe that yes, they are genuinely interested in improving and normalizing relations with India, that they are ready to give up their irredentism on Jammu and Kashmir, all of that. Nothing of that is on the offing. Then why should we go and talk to them to bail them out? When will we get rid of this goddamn Prithviraj Chauhan syndrome that we suffer from? Enemy is down, you should be slaying the enemy rather than saying, अच्छा यार हिंदी फिल्म स्टाइल के फिर दोबारा वो गुंडे को मार दिया आपने, फिर उसको उठाते हो, फिर से घूसा मारते हो. यार जो वो नीचे पड़ा हुआ है उसको लाते वाते मार के खत्म करो यार. I can't understand this nonsensical mindset in India which operates. I've never been able to understand this, but I suppose we are condemned to living with this mindset.
Thank you very much, Sushant, for joining us. Today's episode had a lot of spice, more than I had bargained for, but it's always lovely speaking to you. Thank you for joining our show. Viewers, with Sushant Sareen, Senior Research Fellow of the Observer Research Foundation, a lot of things he said on Pakistan, I mean, most of them I agree with, and also what he ended with, that is the Prithviraj Chauhan syndrome. Don't forgive your enemy just because he's begging for mercy. It's always a bad idea. We've committed some historical mistakes, but we shouldn't do that all over again. And this entire thing about India speaking to Pakistan and, let's have good brotherly relations. We're not brothers. We have fought wars. People have died because of Pakistan. Never forget that. Have a very, very pragmatic foreign policy and outlook towards Pakistan. Thank you for joining this wonderful episode. I'll see you again in a few days with another special guest. Till then, from my team and I here at the Chanakya Dialogue Studios. Jai Hind.